And now I have to come back to my screen. Great. I just have to come back to my screen, hopefully. What we didn't want to have. Sorry. Can you see my screen?
I can see you and my photo. Exclusive interview with Peter and Priscilla.
Great. So, okay, so let's, we should be live on YouTube, I think.
Yeah, it's saying you are.
It does.
Yep.
Live. Great. Does it say we are live? Because for some reason, I have to come back to my screen. Yeah, I don't want an echo because what I have to do is to actually close the YouTube screen. It doesn't let me escape from. Yeah. Just bear with us, please. Here. Yeah, now it's broadcasting.
I can see you and my photo. Exclusive interview with.
Yeah, it looks like it's gonna be okay. So now broadcast. Welcome everyone. And today we are continuing our series, Meet the Expert. We've been granted exclusive interview with Peter Towers, our advisory expert. And the hot topic of the month is how my business can survive. And our expert is gonna talk to us about how we can take advantage of the incentives offered by the government. So Peter Towers, our expert, and I'm Priscilla Smith from Cloud9 Associates. Welcome everyone. Welcome Peter, and talk to us about stimulus packages. The whole Australia is waiting for this news. And yes, your work is very precious to us.
Good morning, Priscilla. How are you? And good morning, everyone watching and listening to this video.
Yes, so let's shed some light and make them more comfortable with incentives out there. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we all know about coronavirus, don't we? It's definitely contributed to some very difficult times that we're all going through now. But what I want to talk to you this morning also encompasses some of the natural disasters that obviously a lot of Australian businesses, farms, primary producers went through in 2019 and the beginning of this year. Droughts. The droughts were around for quite some time, probably longer than just 2019. Bushfires, floods, and cyclones. So we've had a real double whammy. And now, of course, we got COVID-19, coronavirus, that is causing more problems than what I've ever envisaged could happen to Australia. The Prime Minister's called it a 1 in 100 year event. And we want to discuss with you some of the strategies that you might be able to implement. So we've had some business lockdowns. This is the first time in living memory. I don't think they had lockdowns even in the First and Second World War. But pubs, clubs, restaurants and cafes and some of those businesses have developed drive-ins and home deliveries. They've sat down and used their imaginations and come up with alternatives. And perhaps some of the other businesses that are currently in lockdowns might be able to do the same thing. The lockdown also continues to food courts in shopping centres, casinos, churches and other places of worship, gymnasium, indoor sports centres, beauty parlours, libraries, real estate agents, and real estate auctions. That's what I meant to say there, real estate auctions and real estate open houses. So they're some of them. Now, when we produced these slides, we had hairdressers has been partially restricted. The National Cabinet changed that on Thursday, and hairdressers can go a little bit longer, but there's a fair bit of debate about that, I notice, in the community. But at this stage, the hairdressers, other than the 4-metre rule and therefore the number of people that can be in the premises at any one time, there doesn't appear to be any actual restrictions now that have been imposed on hairdressers. And not affected at this stage. This is important for those of you running businesses and the accountants and business advisors watching this presentation. Shopping centres, except for specific lockdowns, but yesterday, of course, we saw some of the major chains of shops voluntarily decide to shut down. And I don't know what some of the big shopping centres are going to look like this morning, Priscilla, because a lot of the tenants decided yesterday that they were calling it quits at this stage. The mining industry's still going strong.
One
as far as
here, Peter, do you think that it's going to be some relief for leases and rentals soon?
Well, I noticed that one of the major retail tenancy businesses is claiming he's not going to be paying any rent. So that's going to be interesting where all that leads to. I think the government at their national cabinet meeting today, what I can work out on their agenda is looking at the situation with landlords, and the government is probably going to have to get involved in this. I suppose at this stage, it's between the tenant and the shopping centre owner as to whether rent's being paid. It's a very interesting position.
Yeah, we would like some clarity on that in the next few days, would be great.
Well, it's at this stage, those businesses, you know, things like jeans stores and clothing stores, apparently, according to the Financial Review's website last night, decided to shut down sometime yesterday. Now, they're not listed in the affected businesses or the lockdowns announced by the Prime Minister. So I'm really not sure where that stands. I think we might hear a bit more from the National Cabinet today in their meeting sometime today, what they think about it. But some of the businesses have obviously voted with their feet. They're claiming that the public are not going to the shopping centres, therefore they're not getting the customers, they're paying the wages, they're paying the rent, and they're not getting the income. That might be affecting a lot of other businesses as well. So it's none of this has had any precedence in Australia or indeed the world, as far as I can see. So it's been determined really hour by hour, and that's why some of the decisions get changed. The other industries, though, that are not affected are the mining industry. I've noticed BHP's advertising for staff. They want 1,500 extra trade type people. I'm told the reason for that is they are putting together reserve crews so that if one of their team comes down with coronavirus symptoms, they then want to withdraw the whole team. It might be 8 or 9 people out of 10 people out of a team, and have a new team to go in and replace them. And that's why they've recruited, or trying to recruit 1,500 people. So they've got people in reserve. so that if the team's got to go off and go through the 14-day quarantine period, they can continue production. And I think we need the mining industry at present. Someone's got to be earning some foreign income for Australia in this very dark
There's
stage.
lots of minerals to be digged out.
Pardon?
Lots of minerals to be digged out from.
Yeah. Well, lucky we got them, I think.
Lucky we got them.
Yeah. So manufacturing is, as far as I know, there's no restrictions. Obviously, some individual businesses. I'm sure the toilet paper manufacturing business is going flat out. Transport, of course, is still operational.
And logistics, I guess.
Yeah, transport and logistics, yes. Yeah. The ports, the railways, the trucks, tradies. Most tradies would find it fairly difficult to work at home, I think, other than doing their bookwork. So carpenters, plumbers, electricians, concreters, etc. There's no restrictions on them, and it's up to them, I suppose, at this stage. Farmers, primary producers, we need them producing to keep up the food supplies because there's still been a run on food in the supermarkets. So what should you do if you are a business operator? The government, both state and federal, have announced a range of loans and grants that are available for people who were affected by the disasters. That was all we had in the news up until about 4 weeks ago, or only 3 weeks ago, was really talking about the natural disasters, the drought, the bushfires, the floods, and that's all been pushed off the news, hasn't it, with coronavirus. But those farmers and primary producers and business people who were affected by those natural disasters have still got those problems. And some of them have found it's now compounded because they're now caught up with the coronavirus problems. For those people who had suffered loss or damage from the natural disasters, there are government loans and grants that are available, both federal, state and territory. My suggestion is, as quick as possible, you get your applications into the appropriate government department. Your accountant, I'm sure, will be available to assist you in that process so that you can get into the queue to have your case considered and hopefully to get some money. Because whilst the supermarkets are saying they don't want to receive cash, they want everyone to pay with a credit card, cash is still very important in business. And the quicker you can get that loan or grant payment from a government department to utilize in your business, the better. The second group there is the government loans and grants that relate, or the government coronavirus stimulus package. Does it apply to you? Now, most of it does not require any application to be made. It's going to be determined by your business activity statement, although there is an application if you're wanting to get the apprentice subsidy. And the tax office are going to have finalised those forms in the next week or so, I understand. But you need to have a look and think about the coronavirus, and we're going to look at some of those issues today for you. Okay, so the government's introduced stimulus packages, and we're assuming that most people watching today, Priscilla, are basically small businesses or medium-sized enterprises, accountants, business advisors, or bookkeepers. So the main group to look at, I think, is the turnover under $50 million. This was changed a couple of times. When the first stimulus package was announced by the Prime Minister, he indicated that the support would be 50% of the pay-as-you-go tax deduction from employees' wages and salaries, up to a maximum of $25,000. That's now been changed in stimulus package number 2, that it's 100% of the PAYG deduction up to a maximum figure of $50,000. And the first payment of that will be based on the business activity statement to be lodged on the 28th of April. So that's obviously the business activity statement for the quarter ended 31 March. If you're lodging on a monthly basis, just divide all these figures by 3, and that will also apply for the lodgement you have to make for the month of March, and then so on.
So my question was here, for the ones who are lodging monthly, did they already receive it, or they're gonna only receive it after 28th of April?
No, yeah, the system is applying from the month of March. So
Yep.
it's when you lodge your BAS statement for the month of March.
Yeah,
And the tax office is not actually paying any money across. They are applying a credit. So the effect of that is if your 100% of your tax deduction amounts to, say, $40,000, you will receive a $40,000 credit that's processed by the tax office. If your 100% of the tax is, say, $62,000, you will get a credit from $50,000 from the tax office, and the amount of PAYG tax remaining to be paid is $12,000. The payment from the government is tax-free.
Yeah, so then we say 100,000, first it comes up to 50,000, and at the beginning of next financial year, I think they come up with another.
Yeah, we do it. This whole process then occurs again at the end of June. So it's the business activity statement to be lodged by the 28th of July, and the same, and we're going through the same process.
All right, that's great. So
we'll all see how it operates very soon, or the end of July, end of April, when the next business activity statements are due to be lodged.
Yeah,
the
so
government,
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, keep going.
The government's also saying that this process is going to continue through to the 28th of October. My reading of it is that the maximum will still be $50,000, but that doesn't quite tie up with the way the announcements have been made. But that's 6 months away yet, and I'm sure we'll get clarification of how that's going to be handled. There is a rumor that a third package is about to be released by the government. There's no doubt we're going to have a staggering debt getting carried forward for everyone to pay, and our kids and grandkids to be paying in the future. But we've got to save businesses if we can. We've got to save jobs.
Yeah, it is temporary, we believe. It's not going to stay with us forever, and then we'll be able to come back to our normal activities and bring some more taxes back to the government in the future. So
pay for it all.
Yeah, it's time the government to relieve the taxes for a short period of time.
Yeah, the tax office website is saying that if you've got any problems with the tax office, contact them. They'll enter into any type of scheme, it seems, at present. They've obviously been told to go softly, but they would like any of us that have got problems with them to contact them, and they will then try to negotiate a payment arrangement with that business. So your accountant or tax agent can contact them, or individual businesses can contact them themselves. The next area is this payment, which was originally, can we just go back a slide? Thanks.
Sorry. Sorry about that.
Is this payment that if you are a business is paying salaries or wages, and remember that could include directors' fees, but there is no PAYG tax being deducted, so the payment being made might be under the tax threshold, and which presumably is the only way it would be. So you've got someone on in a company, and the only person getting paid is receiving $10,000, and at this stage, that's all they've received for the year. They're under the threshold. It would appear that the tax office is going to give a credit to that business of $10,000 on the 28th of April. And the same again in July, and it's my interpretation the same in October. Those amounts were originally described as $2,000 when in stimulus package number 1, and they've been uplifted in stimulus package number 2. The tax office is warning that people who now artificially try to create situations will be closely monitored, and they'll be looking as whether it's tax avoidance. So be careful on any new payments that you're implementing, but just make sure there's a legitimate reason for them. And the fact that someone hasn't been paid all this financial year, or a director hasn't been paid, that's legitimate as I see it. But for the business operators watching this, please talk to your accountants and make sure that that payment, if you're going to do something which is a little bit unusual to what you've been doing, but would then generate you this payment from the government of $10,000, just be a bit careful and make sure you have it fully documented.
Exactly. I was thinking about people who they are on yearly activity statements. Who they pay yearly, their activity statement is not due yet. So
to be honest, I haven't read much about annual business activity statement processes and all this. I imagine that you will get this benefit in when you lodge your activity statement in July. But,
yeah, I guess so, because I have a couple of small business. They are on a yearly basis.
Yeah.
Further benefits of 10,000, then that's that. This is going to continue again, as you said.
Yeah, it's definitely going to continue in July, and for some of the material I've read, definitely into October. Now, the government is obviously forewarning us all that their advice that they're getting from their medical experts is that coronavirus is going to be causing significant problems in Australia for at least 6 months. Now, I've noted what the US president's saying, that he's going to have it sorted out in America by Easter. I did sarcastically say, which Easter? This year or next year?
That's a good one.
Because, but it's going to be interesting. You know, they're locking down cities like New York and Los Angeles and Chicago. If they lock them down for, I think the aim is about 3 weeks, is that going to get rid of this problem? I don't know. I don't know if anyone knows, but the Australian government advice that the Prime Minister and the National Cabinet's been receiving would seem to be saying that this is a 6 months battle that we're involved in to rid ourselves of this problem. And one of the concerning things just on this whole coronavirus is, you know, what's happening in other places like New Guinea and the Pacific Islands. And I noticed Australia offered yesterday to help the Pacific Island countries in the G20 conference, because the last thing we'll want is for us to become clean of coronavirus and then find that it's still prevalent in close areas where we have a lot of trading and a lot of movement of people going backwards and forwards all the time. So this might be around for some time yet. Hate to say that, because this is disastrous for businesses already. And obviously it's disastrous for the people who get ill and the hospital workers. But let's move on. The coronavirus supplement. Now, from a business point of view, there is a definition of the coronavirus supplement that your accountants can give you. But if you're a sole trader or a self-employed person whose hours have reduced or your income is reduced by 20%, then you can qualify for this classification of been eligible for a coronavirus supplement.
I wonder can we document this and what kind of
You're going
documents?
to have the records, Priscilla. It's like everything, some sort of diary. The income earned is the easiest, I think. If someone was earning $10,000 a month as a sole trader, and that is now down to $7,000, that's easily documented. And I think that would be the best way to look at it. The hours worked, well, again, if they got diaries and records that can prove that they were doing 40 hours per week and it's now reduced to 30 hours per week, that will all have to be determined to make that claim.
Yeah, thinking that what period, so compared to last year this time,
Well, I don't know. And I don't think they've really said that. In the first instance, I think it would be the month of March compared to the month of February. Now, there could be all sorts of reasons why there might be variations. If you've got the records, which would give you March 2019, I think that would be great. Just remember, everyone, you're dealing with the tax office and you have to make sure you have a file that supports your position. So that
so this one, the supplement can be applied for online via my ID, MyGov.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So then I have to do a couple of cases next week. So we will see how we go, and we can come back with news how it went.
Yeah, yeah. And everyone, we've all got to bear in mind this is all brand new, and it's all been rushed. The tax office and even the government are not used to rushing things through like this is happening, but this is got its own momentum. This whole coronavirus, hasn't it? It's forcing the government to act fast. It forced a one-day, all-day sitting of Parliament. And for the first time, as far as I know, in a major matter, especially something costing $68 billion, we had a unanimous decision in Parliament. I find
everything.
Find it unbelievable. But okay, coronavirus. So if you qualify as the supplement, you will be entitled to $550 per fortnight. From matters that I've read, the government's expecting to pay that for 6 months. But the big thing with, if you are classified as a coronavirus supplement person, you will be able to if we just go through things, Priscilla, to the next one, we'll be able to apply for an early release of money out of your superannuation fund if you wish. So you'll be able to access up to $10,000 between now and the 30th of June this year, and you can access a further $10,000 in the following year. Just bear in mind, this is your retirement fund, and a lot of experts are very critical of this. I think it should be probably the last item that you access if you're having trouble financing your affairs through this period. So that's the benefit for if you classify as being a coronavirus supplement. Now, the subsidy for apprentices, unfortunately, we've got a mistake there. That's not business. It's businesses with less than 20 full-time equivalent employees, not 50 million turnover. So it's less than 20 full-time equivalent employees. They had to be employing apprentices. Now, the original material I read said 12th of March, but I must admit I was reading something last night which said 1st of March. So I'm not sure what's right there.
I thought I read 12th of March.
Yeah. Well, I was reading on the internet last night, 1 March. It might have been a typo and might mean that person wasn't right. So you need to clarify that. And this is an application form, I gather, from what I've read. the government is saying a 50% subsidy on the apprentice's wage up to a maximum of $7,000 per quarter. And they're proposing to pay this for 3 quarters. So it goes from the 1st of January this year to the 31st of March. That's the first quarter. And then so on. So the government obviously is taking this through at this stage to the end of September, and which is part of their 6 months forecast that coronavirus is going to be an issue in Australia. So if you have an apprentice, and as long as your quarterly payment to that person is less than $14,000, you will be able to get back 50% of that cost. But there is a application form that needs to be lodged. So talk to Priscilla or talk to your accountant to get that form and lodge it with the tax office.
We'll follow up.
It also applies if a business has had to terminate an apprentice because they haven't got enough work, or they're one of the businesses that have been forced to close to go into lockdown, and that apprentice is able to be transferred to another employer, the new employer can claim this benefit. So that's something to bear in mind. If you have agreed to take on an apprentice who was previously engaged, or was engaged on the 1st of March this year with someone who no longer is in business, or they might still be in business, but they've had to lay off that apprentice. So just bear that in mind if you've done that.
Well, the apprentice can be transferred to someone else, and they
Yep. So the new asset instant write-off scheme is now operational. It applies for businesses with turnovers under $500 million. So that's a significant uplift on the previous scheme, which was a turnover of $50 million. The asset that can be written off is an asset that costs up to $150,000. Previously, or currently, that, or not, it is previously now, because this is now the new law. It's been running since the 12th of March. The asset can cost $150,000. If you've got the cash flow or the borrowing capacity that you can spend 3 or 4 lots of $150,000, that's okay.
So then we're going to talk about the $250,000 loan, is it?
Yeah. So the new asset write-off. Now, again, I noticed when in checking the legislation this morning, I'm one day out in that slide, Priscilla, that should be showing the 30th of June. I must admit, something I read the other day said 1 July, but I started to read the legislation early this morning, and it says 30 June. So 30 June 2020 is the asset write-off to be completed by. The government may extend that. They extended the $30,000 deadline a couple of times, you might remember, but that was 2-3 years ago. This is a completely new set of circumstances. The government is trying to get people who have got the money or the borrowing capacity to go out and spend money to try to rejuvenate business activity. It will be interesting how much money gets spent. And it will also be very interesting where those new assets come from. Hopefully a lot of them will come from businesses in Australia.
But then again, it was a question like, you know, some people, they want to go for luxury cars these days, but it doesn't work like that, is it? No. The luxury car limit, I think, is going to stay with us.
Yeah, well, I don't really,
But then we might see vans, other industrial, you know, cars like, you know, vehicles, you know, with freezers at the back and other small trucks and stuff like that. They can go up to 150,000, can that?
Yeah, okay. I'm really not, I never checked out luxury cars, so I'm not sure what happens there. Because obviously $150,000 will bring in a fair number of the luxury cars.
So some Ferraris, they're going to run around on the streets.
Yeah, you won't get your full cost back for a Ferrari. The accelerating depreciation deduction has been established at 50%, and this applies through to 30th of June 2021. So there's a 15-month margin there to undertake those things. So that's what I've just been through, ladies and gentlemen, is a summary of the major legislation that's been enacted for coronavirus at this stage. There could be further changes. In fact, some commentators believe there will definitely be further changes, and Priscilla will keep you up to date with those.
I think we will be back next week.
Yes, well, it might be announced even this afternoon because the National Cabinet's meeting today. So what's all this mean to you people participating in this this webinar? What's it mean to the small and medium-sized community? In fact, big business as well. Everyone's caught in this. This is unprecedented. The first thing I think you need to do is clearly understand what your present position is. Now, some of our viewers might be quite capable and have the time to sit down and actually determine all this yourself, but many of you will need your accountant working with you as a chief financial officer. Now, this is not taxation work, and these comments are really directed at any accountants watching this video, Priscilla, because this is business improvement service. This is, I think, what the market's now looking for. Businesses need a guiding hand, but someone who's looking at their total business activities, not just the taxation situation. Accountants, you can go back and talk to your clients about taxation matters in 2 months' time. But at this stage, your clients are going to need your input on their business, acting more as a chief financial officer. I was a chief financial officer for 11 years, and I can assure you taxation was way down the bottom of the list. And I think most chief financial officers employed by big companies and organizations today will be worried about the business's survival. And that's what I really believe that accountants have got to be doing now with your clients, worrying about the survival. The tax will look after itself, or you can worry about the tax a little bit later on. Now, I know you're not all going to agree with that, but that's my view. So where do you start? I think businesses should be trying to prepare their situation. Where are they with these grants? Have they applied for any grant that they or loan that the government might be prepared to give to them because of the natural disasters? Then make sure that if you've got apprentices, you know that there's a form to be lodged next week, that you do so you can get that subsidy. And think about any monies that might be owing or could be paid for wages. Just bear in mind that's going to then go through as wages or director's fees or things of that nature. And then we need to start looking at the business itself. And where are you in all this? I think the first thing to do is to prepare an estimate of what your income will be week by week for at least the next 6 months, preferably 12 months, but let's say 6 months. It's a long time away, I know, but you need to be taking into account the current restrictions that apply. And then looking at what it's going to mean to your business. And that's then going to require you to review your team to say, well, which of our people do we need to go forward here? And some of the team may have to be laid off, and you will need to be talking to your human resources advisor to determine your approach to that. Supply lines are very important. In fact, I think there's been some wake-up calls for a lot of Australian businesses who have woken up really to the problem that can occur when the supplier to their business in Australia is one or two businesses in one country, and obviously that's been China. Perhaps you should be thinking how you're doing with those suppliers. But at this stage, what quantities of products are they going to be able to send to you? Can you negotiate improved payment terms with them? Can you get some discounts? Can you get some help from them to help you through this process? Talking to your landlord is going to be important. At the beginning of this webinar, we talked about the situation that seems to have occurring in shopping centres, where some major tenants yesterday were giving notice to the landlord that they wanted significant rent reductions. In fact, they didn't want to pay any rent, according to the media articles, until the coronavirus problem is over in Australia. That could be 6 months. That'll be interesting conversation, won't it, with the landlord? But can you negotiate with your landlord on rent payments, probably changing your lease agreements? My comment to a few people in the last couple of days who hesitated about doing this is, well, if you don't ask, you won't know what the answer will be. Now, I gather this is on the agenda for the National Cabinet today. In the first instance, I suspect they're looking at rent payments for housing accommodation, whether rules can be introduced to prevent evictions for the period of this crisis, and whether landlords can be encouraged to negotiate on rent adjustments for a period. That will be interesting. So I'd suggest that you talk to your landlord. Now, many of you businesses may want to bring your accountants in on these discussions, but I'm just going through what I think they are at this stage. A lot of this you can probably do yourselves and then have it all summarized so you can then have a proper planning meeting with your accountant. So the next one I want to look at is debtors. If you have debtors in your business, then now is the time to be undertaking a review of the people who owe you money and making contact with them and trying to get them, first of all, to pay you the amount, especially if it's beyond your stipulated trading terms, whether they're 30 days or whatever they are. And if you have others who are above the stipulated trading terms telling you they can't pay you now, try and get some sort of payment plan in place. Because I believe the secret for business is going to be to get assets converted to cash that you can then use in your business as soon as possible. The next area is stock and inventory. I've been an accountant for a long time, and invariably when a client's had some problems in the past, one of the first things we've gone to is having a look at their stock. And you'll be amazed what you find, and half the time the owner didn't know it was there. You find problem stocks, you'll find some damaged stock, of course, slow moving stock, you're only selling one of them a year, and last season stock, especially if you're in the fashion industry. If ladies wore pink last year, they won't be wearing it next year. So why hang on to it? It might not, that color mightn't be back in vogue for 2 or 3 years. So there's an opportunity to try to identify where the stock that's just eating its head off in warehousing charges and interest. So whilst interest rates are low, there's still a payment there, and try to convert that investment into cash that you can then use. So have a stock sale. You might say, where are the customers going to come from? I really don't know, but the customers seem to flock to all sorts of sales over the internet. You might have to use your imagination on how you promote those sales. And you're going to have to be careful, of course, with the social congregation of people rules now. So perhaps trying to sell those items over the internet is the best way to do it. The other area that over the years I've noticed businesses seem to have some of these things stuck away in a back shed or a back paddock or somewhere is surplus assets. Someone went to an auction and bought something because they thought they might need it one day, and 5 years later it's never been used. Or alternatively, they bought it because they thought they had worked for it and it's been used for 1 week, and it sat there and it cost over $200,000. Now, if those assets are in your inventory, I'd suggest you look at them very seriously and say, let's try to sell them and get some money back that we can now plow back into the business. If you need to use an asset like one of those items for a few days in 2 or 3 months' time, go and hire the machine from someone else. In the meantime, you've had that injection of cash into your business.
Yeah. So the idea is to circulate the money to boost a bit the, the activity, business activity, buying, selling things. Somebody sells, somebody buys. So just a bit of movement in there. That's what we want to see, isn't it?
With the aim, Priscilla, of trying to get a cash injection into your business, because, and what I'm leading up to here is the budgets and cash flow forecast. So that was the preamble to doing a budget and cash flow forecast. Let's see if things can be improved or some strategies can be implemented on those half a dozen items we just went through. And then you can sit down with some reasonable confidence, if you've been preparing your figures and estimates fairly accurately, to prepare some budgets and cash flow forecasts. Now, these should be based on the income projections you've just produced, that week by week for 6 months, the labor manning that you then need based on those projections, and so on. Many of you in running businesses will need to be talking to your accountant, using your accountant as your chief financial officer to go through and prepare these items so that you're then in a position to have a good look at where you are. Now, at the end of this process, you may decide that, unfortunately, this business needs to either close on a temporary basis for the balance of this crisis, which is obviously what's happened to the businesses, or most of them, that are in the declared lockdown businesses. There's a lot of talk around at present that the whole of Australia might get locked down permanently not permanently, but for a number of weeks. So the real issue then is going to be that some of those businesses, unfortunately, will probably not be able to reopen in 6 or 7 months' time. And that's a decision that you need to closely look at. You need to look at the security that you've given to a lender. In many cases, it will be a charge on your house, and that's a very serious consideration you have to take into account in looking at trying to continue in your business. Now, that's a major decision that I think just about everyone in the small, medium-sized enterprise category, at least, has got to look at, and obviously a lot of big businesses. Now, there has been some good news. On the 12th of March, the Reserve Bank governor announced that the Reserve Bank was releasing over $90 billion to the banking system to make loans for up to 3 years to small and medium-sized enterprises. So that has basically been put in place, as I understand it from the governor's news release. That money will basically be available for the banks from around the 1st of April, which is next Wednesday. So even though you may have talked to your bank 3 or 4 weeks ago about getting a loan for this crisis, or just a loan for your business, and you got brushed off, banks haven't been very enthusiastic to do loans or deals earlier this year, have they? But the ball game's changed. The Reserve Bank and the government also has contributed, I gather, about another further $15 billion. They're nice big figures, aren't they? 90 billion, 15 billion into this pool of money that's available. And the government and the Reserve Bank have agreed that banks should be lending this to businesses for up to 3 years at a very low interest rate to help businesses survive through this period. This is not meant to help you whatever you had in plan to do in 2021. It's to help get through this troublesome period.
What was the story about the 50% collateral by the government? So the government is gonna step in as a collateral for 50% of the loan. I mean, the security.
Yeah, well, but in some of the notes from the Reserve Bank, they're saying, and I was reading them last night again, they're saying that this will be unsecured lending that the banks are making. Now, I'm not sure whether I've read that right, and that we'll get clarification on that as people go off to see the banks.
Exactly, because or unsecured or 50% secured by the government or something like that.
The banks had been told that the government would supply security for 50%. So it's an interesting situation. We've never had a rescue package like this before, and I suspect the rules are still being written. But I think the message for everyone that I would like to impart to you today out of this webinar is that even though you may have had some disappointment with a conversation you had with your bank recently, everything's changed. The bank may have had an inkling that this was likely to happen, or the bank person you spoke to, or they might not have. They were just told they had no money to lend. Well, suddenly there's an enormous amount of money that's available. I don't know how far that's going to go. The maximum loan, I gather, is $250,000. That's been stipulated by the Reserve Bank. So it's to help people get through this period. And it will be interesting to get some feedback from business operators, Priscilla, and accountants, just how all this works out, how good the system's going to work. I want to
suggest to some businesses to reinvent themselves, to start to stock items which are in demand instead of holding on to their normal operations. I thought, I wanted to suggest, even last night I saw someone who was selling fashion clothes. They started to sell masks, hand sanitizers and stuff like that.
Yep.
So it's a very good move. And this is where these loans can come in, to invest in new stock.
Okay, so we've been the ongoing management for this crisis. I've included some notes here that's part of what we're talking to accountants who are our subscribers, members. I think businesses need a coronavirus disaster team. This is fast moving. This is trying to get across a fast moving river. You need to have a plan. And our suggestion is that in every business, if you've got 2 or 3 people, put a small group together that's going to have a meeting. Might only be 5 minutes, might be a quarter of an hour, might be longer, of course, every day, to just look at what's happening, monitor what the national cabinet under the Prime Minister are announcing, because there's decisions and there's some changes getting made virtually every day. I think you need to review strategies if you're going to be having people work from home. What are they going to be doing at home? How are they going to fit in? Will have you got NBN? Will the communications occur properly? Because there's obviously still a significant number of areas in Australia that haven't got NBN. And I'm lucky, we've had it for a long time. We were one of the first areas. Not that I'm really an advocate for it, but I suppose we've all got used to it now. But it's probably going to be difficult for areas that haven't got it. If you haven't already started this concept of having daily team meetings or huddles, again, 5-10 minute type meetings, this would be a great time to do it if you're going to have some of your staff working at home. Keep in contact with them. If you're not a subscriber to Skype or Zoom, I think you should be, because you need to be able to communicate. Use the technology to communicate. And some of you may well want to communicate 2 or 3 times a day to your team members. I think if you're just wanting to contact people regularly by telephone, Skype's got to be the best deal going. I shouldn't say it, but I subscribed to Skype probably 6 or 7 years ago, and we've never paid any money. I don't know how they survive, but I have a key staff member who lives probably about 800 kilometers away from where I'm doing this broadcast today. We're talking to her on Skype all day and just buzzing through. So it's a great tool. Keep in touch with your suppliers. They're pretty important to a lot of you business people, knowing when you're going to get your supplies, seeing if they'll do deals with you. But at the same time, I'd be looking to try to create some new supplier chains if you've been caught out with having problems getting supplies, if you've relied on 1 or 2 suppliers out of one country. Perhaps you need to be in another country as well. Might cost you a little bit more money, or perhaps you need to be seriously looking at manufacturing products back in Australia. I think one of the real lessons that's going to be closely analysed by all sorts of people when this crisis is over is, why has Australia had so much of its manufacturing capacity gone offshore? And at times, I think some things should be still manufactured in Australia, even though it might cost a little bit more money. And perhaps in marketing and promotional campaigns, people need to be reminded, the customers need to be reminded that some things are going to cost more money because some things should be manufactured in Australia. But I'll get off my soapbox now. Keep in touch with your customers. What are your customers doing? What are they likely to do? How much product or services are they looking for? And I think that's about. Continually monitor your cash flow, of course, of your business. Review your costs. This is one area where you can really work through with the accountant, go through line by line of your cost estimates. What could be eliminated? And many of you will need to look at your team manuals. Most of them probably don't talk about coronavirus. They might have other types of viruses mentioned, but have you covered every sort of situation that can occur? This presentation today has been under the banner of ESS Small Business in conjunction with Priscilla, and you can access material on our website, or you can go from Priscilla's website, which I'm sure she'll show you shortly, the link. And we have a range of products.
I believe in Peter Towers' tools. He developed amazing tools for accountants to use in these kind of cases to become the best advisors out. Peter developed packages and support packages for small business. I really believe in his work, and I think you should take advantage of what he can do for you. In the same time, yes, I'll support him, and I'm going to do the meetings before we have to reach out to Peter, so we don't waste his time before a real case comes through. Please come first, talk to me, and if you don't find the right tool for you on those websites, we will dig it out for you and help you use it. And so, as we said, we will update, we'll keep you up to date this time every week. Before that, it was every fortnight or once a month. But now we believe that it has to be, Peter comes back on 1st of April. Please follow. And this is the link. You can follow his webinars, and we'll also do one with me. And you can send your questions out to Peter by email. Then you can find the support. This is the page where we offer the 30-minute strategy meeting, where we you get in touch with me, and then we develop a strategy and how we go about your business, how you can help. If you go to the website, and apply these codes, which I put next to it, you will get a 20% discount on the products. Please go there. You're going to find something you never found before. It is amazing. For small business, you got amazing stuff to work with. Again, and accountants to help small business. We do have amazing tools and resources developed by Peter Towers. We appreciate his work, and we also appreciate his time today. Thanks for being with us, Peter.
Okay, thanks, Priscilla. Thanks, everyone. Good luck through this process. Remember, it will end, and we want as many businesses that are still active and able to take Australia into 2021 with great confidence. So good luck.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Priscilla.